Tail Investment Podcast. We're talking to the Green Queen today, and that's my friend Selva, who co-edits a service called New Energy Investor for Fat Tail Investment Research, and they're following the transition, decarbonisation, the renewable transition, decarbonisation, and all the investment opportunities that spring from that. Here in Australia, the biggest one for the last 2 years across the entire market has been lithium stocks. They have gone absolutely bananas in the last 2 years, and rightly so. The lithium price has gone crazy high from where it was in 2020, and the stocks have run up. So Selva's going to come on and tell us a little bit about what's been going on there. But there's two other important things that she touches on, and that's the other metals that are all part of that boom in batteries and electric vehicles. And of course, a big trend that I've started to follow, which is the rise of carbon credits and their impacts on not only economies, but stock valuations, because companies that can sell those are going to have a different source of revenue that they haven't had before. And obviously other companies are going to have to pay for them to cover their emissions. So a really interesting episode, and a very interesting person. I know Selva quite well. And she is always reading about energy and the shift and all that type of thing. Very diligent. So here's Selva, the Green Queen, talking lithium and renewable energy. Well, I alluded to it earlier. I've got my friend Selva, the Green Queen, on. She's the editor of New Energy Investor, and we're going to be talking lithium. Now, if you follow the markets here in Australia, you know, lithium stocks have gone absolutely bananas in the last 2 years. It's been absolutely by far the best sector to be in. And Selva's been writing about the trend of batteries and renewable energy for ages now. But however, on to the left of the lithium boom, we also have coal, oil, and gas going bananas, especially with the situation in the Ukraine. So, Selva, welcome to the show. And let's begin, are we still right to think that renewables and lithium are the future of the energy market with everything that's happening in the world today?
Certainly. I think now even more than ever, I think that's the case, because you saw, I mean, just even before just with the pandemic, you saw a bit of an acceleration. I mean, clean energy stocks just went crazy during the pandemic, which was a bit of a surprise, I think. But that was one catalyst. And then this conflict in Ukraine has actually even made people realize even more the need for renewable energy, not only because of climate, but also because it gives you some sort of energy independence. So renewable energy is very much, any country basically can produce some sort of renewable energy. So I think that's one of the biggest takeouts now from this conflict.
Yeah, I agree. Because I mean, as good as a high oil price is for oil producers now, it obviously hurts the end consumer. So It's only natural that people will look for alternatives. And especially, as you say, now with this kind of retraction of the globalization and trade, countries are looking to become more self-sufficient. And part of that, obviously, energy security is a massive thing, especially for a country like China, which is like hostage to the oil price because it imports so many. We know that lithium stocks have gone bananas, but I know you just alluded to it. In 2020, renewable stocks and clean energy stocks went bananas. Did they come off the boil a bit since that sort of wild peak back then?
They did for a bit, and then they got a couple of boosts from basically from the US. There was a lot of there was the Biden infrastructure bill that they passed recently, so that put some money into renewables. And also in December of 2020, Trump passed a little bit of money for renewables too. So that actually, they got a big boost in December 2020, January 2021. So they've gone up, they've come up a bit, and then they're still, I mean, depends on the stock. Some of them are going crazy, some have come down. Mostly what we're saying now is the EV battery metal needed for the metals needed for the EV battery that are actually going crazy.
And do you still think lithium is the best way to play that, or is it graphite or cobalt or nickel or what?
No, I
The
think
other ones?
a lot of them. I mean, yeah, not just lithium. I think lithium graphite I'm really bullish on, mainly because lithium is part of the cathode, which is the positive side of the battery. Graphite is part of the anode, which is the negative, and you need that's basically like what you need for the anode. So the cars need EV cars need about, I think, 70 kilos of graphite. And while the lithium part of the battery is there's still a lot of chemistries in play, the graphite part is very much set on how it's going to be, it looks like. So I think graphite is a great way to play it, and it's not been as publicized, let's say, as lithium.
Yeah, talking about government support, I know Zero Resources just came out this week and said that they've got an agreement, sort of working with the US government to get funding for the plant they're trying to build in the US. So it's clear that the governments are going to throw lots of money at this sector, probably for a long time to come. Actually, it's been a big week for news because we had Tesla come out with their results, and their deliveries are booming, and they're making money and all that. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine. I still remember in 2017, 2018, when, all the people were saying, I want to say all the people, the critics of Tesla were saying, it doesn't make money. It's burning through cash. It's a fad. Musk is a crazy guy. And you look at the chart of what Tesla has done since, it's just gone absolutely bananas. So there's massive opportunity here. I think too, here in Australia, we're actually ahead of, I'm getting these notes from the US guys talking about the battery boom, and but the Aussie listed lithium stocks have already run so high. The big question is, we had the initial lithium boom from like 2015 across to 2017, then the price crashed. Do you think it's feasible that scenario could happen again, or that the lithium price will be at this sustained high price for a longer time?
I think at least for this year, I think we're going to see high lithium prices. I was actually looking at some of the production numbers, and this year we produced more lithium than in 2018 when the prices crashed. So, and demand, next year you have what's different is, well, basically you have the governments that are making all these commitments to get electric vehicles on the road. And then you have all the car makers also making EVs, more EVs than ever before, really. So I think that you're gonna see sustained high prices for a little while, I think, at least till the end of the year. You have to be careful what you look at in stocks, just because there's different things that you should be looking at, like in different stocks. So a stock picking, I think, is like really crucial. I don't think every lithium stock is going to be a winner. I think you really have to choose what stock you look at. And right now, like everything with kind of the name of lithium is kind of going crazy. So you have to be really careful with what you pick,
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking of something and it's just dropped out of my head. So we're talking, okay, so we've got the lithium boom. Yeah, I know what I was thinking of. I guess a question overhanging the entire thing is it possible for the lithium battery to be disrupted? I was just reading yesterday, again, this has been around for a while, the idea of solid state batteries or alternative tech. Do you have an opinion on that? Do you think that as of now, the lithium ion battery is the leader and cannot be displaced for a while yet?
No, I think it definitely can be disrupted. You have a lot of companies just trying to do just that. Like there's a lot of different chemistries on play. There's a lot of different types of things. So it's definitely not set in stone. You could definitely find a different type of battery that works, that maybe doesn't have lithium, or that just that is completely different chemistry. So I think it's definitely up for disruption.
But you think that's possibly a couple of years away, or it's like literally a threat that you have to be conscious of right now?
There's a lot of different companies doing different things. So you just have to be I mean, just for now, I think it's probably lithium is probably the leader, but there's definitely a threat that, yeah, that's not definitely set in stone.
Just to broaden it out a little bit, obviously the conversation is dominated by electric cars, lithium stocks, lithium batteries. What about, I mean, your service is New Energy Investor. There's more to life than that. There's like wind power, there's solar power. Is there exciting things happening there that people are less conscious of?
Sure. Actually, wind has been going crazy since, and it hasn't been spoken as much. Wind stocks have been going really well actually since the Ukraine conflict, just because it's one of the ways to create energy, without or getting closer to energy independence. So wind has been one of the things that we've seen going pretty well. Solar also has actually gone up a little bit, some of the solar stocks. And then, I mean, there's lots of different exciting things that we see. Like we look at clean tech, we look at companies that are doing really interesting things in heating, in even data, or even just companies that are looking at just wireless things, just basically like getting off the grid, So. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different things. There's plenty of different aspects on the renewable.
Well, interesting you say that. I was reading this morning that in Perth, there's a proposal for a new tall tower. And I think 40% of the construction is supposed to be timber. And the idea being that it's a carbon negative building. Mm-hmm. And Atlas and the Aussie guys that are billionaires now are building one of these in Sydney. So the idea that the property market could be reshaped by this whole thing is pretty intriguing as well.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have some things, some stocks like that. Our stocks are pretty much in a wide variety of range. It's not just wind or solar or minerals. It's just pretty much everything. It's there's like lots of different aspects just happening everywhere, and it's really going to impact everything. I mean, it's really going to impact mining. It's once you go into getting closer to carbon neutral, you're really going to impact everything. Every single business is going to be impacted, and every single business is going to be maybe looking for services that are consulting services, or there's so many
angles to this kind of story. And we should say that you and your product there follow not just Australia, but you're looking in the US, in the UK, Europe. So it's it doesn't get any bigger than a global opportunity than renewable energy. Well, I don't know. A couple of years ago, there was plenty of skepticism about renewable energy, with the idea that it could never fully account for the energy needs because the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. Is that still valid in your view, or is that a view that sprang from the earlier industry development of renewables when they couldn't cope and had higher costs, etc.? How do you view the energy mix? Are we likely to end up 100% renewable?
I think it's I think it's very likely. Like you only need to look at some of the stuff that's happening in Australia. Like for example, last year you had a spike in prices that came from a coal mine. A coal plant.
Power station.
Yes, the Queensland station that caught fire, and it was the renewables that actually came online and actually got kind of picked up the pieces. And you had in this case, it was hydro was pretty important in just keeping things going as a battery and just guarding the electricity. I think what we need to really work out is the batteries. I think that's the missing piece, which we already are looking at things, but I think it's definitely, I mean, you can look at South Australia beating records in electricity mix. I mean, last year you had I think it was, we wrote an article on this actually recently, the electricity mix in 2021 for renewables grew. So and you have a few countries that were passing, I think it was 30% of I'll have to look at the number, but I think it was 30% of renewables in the mix. So you're seeing a lot of the renewables energy in the mix growing.
Well, it's really interesting because you think sort of longer term and you're like, okay, if oil and gas get displaced, countries like, well, Australia would get hit too, but especially like Russia and Saudi Arabia, like their entire economy is based on these two things. If that goes away, it's like, well, what else do they got? But also too, the massive savings that would, like, think of the West, like the US, how much we all pump into the fossil fuel sector just by our needs. Like if those savings were realized, because correct me if I'm wrong, but renewable energy is the cheapest that you can get, right?
Yes. Like the IEA actually crowned solar the cheapest energy ever in a couple of years ago, I think it was. But I mean, I think Australia's really lucky in the sense that, yeah, you have coal and you have oil, and that, I mean, that's not going away anytime soon anyway. But you also have all these critical materials for the renewable energy. You have copper, you have, I mean, lithium, you have everything. And then there's also a big opportunity in hydrogen, in green hydrogen. And you're seeing, I mean, you're seeing a lot of investment from the States on green hydrogen, and you're also seeing a lot of private companies investing in green hydrogen.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because hydrogen is not something I've read a lot about. And I just discovered there's a thing called blue hydrogen, and I think there may be another color of hydrogen.
There's lots of
green
yes.
hydrogen, but it refers to their environmental kind of credentials, right? Can you tell us what is green hydrogen?
So green hydrogen is basically made from renewables using electrolysis. So it's made through wind or solar, and basically through a process of electrolysis, and it just makes it into green hydrogen. And then you can store it as ammonia also, and ship it, for example, to different places. So that's where, like, the export, like, I think the export market for Australia could be pretty big on that. Just you're already seeing Saudi Arabia also make with some green hydrogen projects. So you're seeing that they're also preparing for this. So,
so in Australia, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the thing holding back hydrogen now is the cost. Is that right?
Yes. So it needs to go under $2 to actually be competitive. So the cost is, I'm not sure right now the cost. I think it was 5 or 6. But that's the biggest thing, the cost. But that, I think, with more projects and more things, you could bring the cost down.
And hydrogen would be like, there's hydrogen cars, right? Like talking about what could disrupt lithium. Potentially it could be hydrogen.
Yeah, I mean, hydrogen is mostly used for heavy industries. So it would be used for just aviation or trucks, things like that mostly. Like, I think that's the biggest uses for hydrogen. So just like hard to decarbonize processes, like planes, trucks, trains, things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's like the green hydrogen market that's also been going pretty crazy, and it's really interesting what's going on there.
Do you think this whole thing, though, obviously stocks are volatile, do you think it's something where you kind of need to commit for a very long time? Like, you're not trying to trade hydrogen, I would assume. It's like you go, okay, there's an industry developing here. I don't know how long it's going to take, but if it does what oil did, for example, which was in 1910, not that used, and then 50 years later, it was the most important industry in the world. Like, do you see that these investment ideas as generally things that you really do need to commit to for like 5 years minimum to out to 10, maybe even longer?
Yeah, I mean, the hydrogen industry is probably like a long-term investment, just because it's still developing. I think they're saying around 2030 that it'll hit price parity, maybe earlier. But yeah, it's something that is long-term. I'm trying to think of any.
Well, I'm just thinking of even like Amazon, the star of today's market. For 20 years it was just grinding. Well, I was grinding on, but it boomed, it busts. Then people said, "Oh, it doesn't make money." It's only really in the last 5 years that this, it's exploded into everyone's consciousness. But it took a long time for that for Jeff Bezos to build it up into what it's become. And even Tesla, again, we talked about, like, it, must have started that a long time ago, and it's only really been in the last few years that the stock itself has done this explosive sort of thing. But it's not something that you can predict particularly easy. That's why I say you sort of have to commit, at least to my mind. All right, so lithium, as far as you're concerned, the boom's going to keep running, but you have to be either grab a basket of the stocks like an ETF perhaps, or individually sift through them. Graphite, I know you've mentioned. I'm guessing that you're, from what you've said, bullish on copper, nickel. I know with the batteries, there's different formations in how they use the metals. Is that something that you've delved into? I know there's the one that doesn't use cobalt, and there's one that emphasizes more nickel, and then one with a dash of manganese, or I don't know all the different variations, but is that something that you've tried to make sense of?
Yeah, I have. It's just, I mean, as I said, it's just very hard to know exactly what the final battery will be. Like, I mean, I read all the time different companies trying to do different things with batteries, and just trying the different mixes. I mean, most of them aren't commercial yet. So there's just a lot, actually. It's super interesting.
My understanding too is, like, Tesla within its own company has different batteries, and they'll go to the customer and say, look, well, this one is a bit cheaper, but you don't get the same range.
Right.
Because we've played with the chemistry, and yeah, that's correct, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not sure if Tesla has different batteries, but I know there's different batteries that, depending, just for example, with lithium hydroxide or carbonate, like lithium hydroxide will increase the range of the battery, for example, compared to lithium carbonate. So it depends, and yeah, there's different ranges. Everyone's kind of experimenting. So there's different batteries, like, all over, So I mean, there's a lot of tech companies just trying to do different things and trying to get the right battery mix, let's say.
Yeah. And we should say one thing that I don't think is always clear if you're not really in the market for these stocks. The Aussie miners dig up what's called the lithium spodumene, right? So that's like the raw material, but that has to go to a converter, which then turns it into hydroxide or carbonate, which are the two things you mentioned. So that all that's done in China, is that correct? So do you think that the Western countries will try to pull some of that conversion capacity home?
That's interesting. I mean, that's, for me, one of the most interesting parts of lithium, is that, I mean, most of the lithium is mined basically Australia, China, Chile, Argentina, but then it actually has to be processed to be for battery materials. Most of the battery production happens in China, and you're already seeing the West just looking for non-Chinese supply. So you have the US and in Europe, where the two places where car manufacturing is really important. And they're already trying to shore up supply that is non-Chinese. You had Biden invoke Cold War era statute for critical minerals. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where basically it gives the government powers to ensure that there's critical materials, and they're going to pump a lot of money, I think, into actually getting mining, but not only mining, but processing and recycling. I think it's going, because recycling will add a lot of the supply. It's an easier supply. So you're going to see a lot of investments, I think, in that. And even, I mean, even car makers are trying to look at that, just to getting Tesla has been trying to get mining closer to home, getting the supply chains closer to home.
Well, I know Musk came out recently and he sort of said, look, the price of lithium is getting so high, we might have to go mine the stuff ourselves.
Right. Well, it's funny he said that, because they bought some an area, 10,000, I think, acre in Nevada, and in 2020, I think it was, and they said they were going to start mining. So they've been talking about it for a long time, and they actually, I think it was a couple of years ago, where they made a deal with a miner, and then to buy them, and then that fell through. So I mean, I think they're pretty close to
well, I mean, one of the interesting things I know I follow is that Tesla is doing deals with Aussie miners. So we've seen the nickel one with BHP. There's the graphite one with Syrah.
Yeah.
Or Liontown Resources, sorry, the lithium one, they've come in. So it's clear that it's a concern of them to lock up supply for what they need. And then, as you say, it's not like they're the only car company in the world. So it's like the Europeans, the Brits, the Chinese, and the Americans are all like, well, it's a bit of a race going on here. So it's going to be super interesting to see how it all plays out. And then, of course, like Rio tried to get the lithium mine going in Serbia, and they told them to rack off for the environmental reasons or whatever. So it's like this, on one hand, the pushback against mining is, we don't want to, it's a dirty thing or whatever. And then you're like, well, if you want the clean energy future, you're going to have to mine the materials. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see where it goes.
You're seeing miners also getting pretty concerned about, I went to a mining conference recently, and they're really concerned about, sustainable mining and just emissions. And I mean, you saw, I think Fortescue is getting electric trucks. I think it's hydrogen fuel cell trucks.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, Twiggy Forest is like rattling the cage to everybody, going, guys, we can't keep doing this, because they all, metaphorically drink gallons of diesel, all these mines. And but I noticed too, when I go over some of the new projects, a lot of them are putting in renewable power sources from the beginning. So it's part of their feasibility studies is, how do we get power? And how can we make it, clean as much as possible? So that's good.
That was the conference that I went. It was electric mining basically, and there's one electric mine in Australia, but there's been a lot. Like the miners have been. For what I saw in that meeting, they're very concerned, and they've been doing a lot of things just because they know that's kind of the future. That's what they're going to have to do, because if not, they'll be, especially with the carbon prices and the European carbon markets, like to export, they might get they might not be as competitive as other ones if they're not doing it.
Again, you just reminded me of something. We had James Allen, your co-editor on the service earlier. He was talking about the carbon price and how these things are becoming sort of tradable instruments. Incidentally, now that, do you know what the carbon price in Europe is? It's still it's to about 90 something euros or whatever, and that was like an all-time high. Has it stayed up there as far as you know?
No, it fell. It fell, but I haven't looked at it in the last week or so, but it fell, and then it kind of had recovered a bit. So I mean,
I'm just thinking, as an investor, if you're listening to this, the sort of rise of this carbon credit thing, it has to come in at some point, because firms like Santos and Woodside are going to have to, be buying these things eventually and offset their emissions, and vice versa. Companies will be selling them that generate them, and it's going to become part of the valuation of the stocks.
I think there's going to be a kind of a reprice, but I think especially for the exporters into Europe or export, I think there's going to be a bit of carbon, because Europe is making a lot of strides on this, so they're going to try to protect the industries that.
We talked to James and I talked about this. It's like Europe is going to go like, if you're producing dirty steel, for example, you're not going to be able to sell to our market cheap, right, and we're going to undercut our own steel makers that are doing it the way we want it to be done.
Right.
And it's like, well, which country goes next? Like, is the US going to go same thing? Like China, you can't ship your, whatever it is, if it's not considered clean, they'll put a tax on it.
Exactly.
So again, like investment risks and opportunities from this. All right, so that's cool. So have you guys done your April edition yet of the service?
No, you mean the monthly?
Yeah. Do you do a monthly report?
We don't do that. No, we just basically send trades as we see them.
Oh, right.
So yeah, it could be that 1 month you get 3, 4, another month not as many. So yeah, it depends on the
on the market.
On the market, yeah. Sometimes usually one a month, but usually more than one.
All right, well, definitely we'll put a link below to the service if anyone's interested. But so from your perspective, high oil gas is just driving this trend even harder than it was already going.
Definitely. I think higher oil and gas prices are actually going to make people think twice about maybe getting an EV car. I mean, high lithium prices will also push car prices, EV car prices higher, but I think the higher oil price is going to definitely push into this renewable energy, and especially like now what you're seeing with Russia just having control of energy supplies. Just you see that just giving the reins to someone else on your energy supply chains is not probably the best thing to do, right? So
yeah, absolutely. All right, well, if you're listening to this, there you go. You've just got it straight from the Green Queen, our girl Selva, who's always covering this sector. So absolutely, hydrogen, carbon credits, lithium, big important things to follow in the market. So thanks for coming on, Selva.
Thank you,
And
Callum.
we'll catch up with you probably in about 6 months, and we'll see how things are going.
Perfect. We'll see you then.
Ciao.